there, chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we are in Belgium, taking on the much harder than it looks Hills of Flanders route. This route is available on Rouvy, so let's get right to it. This is a decently long ride at 46.5 kilometers with an impressive 853 meters of elevation gain. The whole ride averages just 2%, but Rouvy will max it out at 18%. Strava suggests it maxes out at 16%, but the section at this gradient is quite short, so this small discrepancy is hardly a big deal. Either way, it's still pretty steep. There are 2 Strava segments included on Rouvy, but there's 27 different segments listed on Strava itself. Many of them are doubled up or just slightly different from each other, so I won't be going through every single one, just the main difficult hills. Now, the first hill you'll encounter is Koppenberg. It's at the 480 meter mark, is somewhere between 500 and 550 meters long, with 59 to 63 meters of elevation gain. It averages between a massive 11.3 and 12.2%, and maxes out at the 18%. You start quite innocently in a small little village, and suddenly a huge cobblestone hill looms ahead. It very quickly ramps up from 6% to 18%, and stays in double-digit gradients until the plateau. I suppose this is too short to be categorized, but it is very difficult with the relentless gradient. This one is hard to do well on, as you don't have much time in the route to get a decent speed or rhythm happening. Best off to just spin up it easily and save some energy for the rest of the hills. The next couple of hills you'll encounter do have Strava segments. Both are less than 700 meters long, with gradients averaging between 4 to 5%. Neither are all that difficult, and with both coming after the 6 kilometer mark, you'll have plenty of time to settle into a rhythm before getting to them. Just watch the terrain carefully to use it to your advantage. The second of the hills is a bit tougher, peaking at about 13%. The steep sections are pretty short, so definitely good ones to stand up and push for. The first segment on Rouvy is Rouvy. It's just before the 12 kilometer mark, is 5 kilometers long with 127 meters of elevation gain, and averages just 2%. The gradients max out at about 8% after 1 kilometer or so. This is actually a very hilly segment within the hilly ride. There's plenty of downhills to use to help push up the uphills, and after the section with the peak, the gradients back off quite a lot and will only hit about 7% 2 more times. It's a nice one to try and push along pretty quickly if you can, but as always, you can just sit back and spin up it too. The next Strava segment is the hill Kanarieberg. It's at the 20.5 kilometer mark, is 1.1 kilometers long, with 82 meters of elevation gain, and averages 7.3%. A few hundred meters in, it peaks at about 13%. Strava considers this a Cat 4 climb. There's a bit of a downhill before the start that you can use to help push up, but it does get quite steep very quickly, so this will only carry you so far. The climb has 3 kind of steeper sections with a bit of a false flat in between each. They don't offer much in the way of recovery, but it's a nice way to break up the steep bits. There's a nice flat to downhill after the segment though. The next Rouvy segment is Zandstraat. There are a couple of Strava segments that are similar, with a few different difficult to pronounce names. The segment is at the 27.5 kilometer mark, is 2.6 kilometers long, with 110 meters of elevation gain, and averaging 3.8%. Strava considers this one a Cat 4 climb as well. Rouvy peaks this one at about 10% within the first kilometer. After the first steep section, there's a nice dip which leads to a mellow uphill. Use the terrain before the segment and in the middle to your advantage to push up the hills. The Zandstraat segment is hidden on PC and may not show up on the Strava app itself. There's a short pinch at about the 35 kilometer mark. It's about 650 meters long with 50 meters of elevation gain and peaks at 12%. There's no segment listed for this short pinch though. The terrain is starting to pitch upwards for a while after the downhill, so this one is really just a sit and spin or stand up and push kind of pinch. There's another downhill following it, so pushing up this one isn't actually too bad. The next Strava segment climb is Oude Coermont. There are several similar ones listed with similar names. They are all quite different in the distances though. Some are more of just the first climb, some are the segment continuing to the downhill. I've chosen one of the longer ones to review here. It's just before the 40.5 kilometer mark, is 2.15 kilometers long, with 95 meters of elevation gain, averaging 4.4%. Rouvy peaks this one at 11%, and it is right in the first of the climb sections. There's 2 false flats to downhill sections as well, and the gradients stay under about 7% for the remainder of the segment. If you can push up the first uphill, it's an easy one after that. Really use the terrain well on this one, as there's not a lot to pace, but saving as much energy as possible here is very important. Now the last segment here is Peterberg. There are 7 different Strava segments listed, so there will be some slight variations between each of them. I'll go over the stats listed for the one simply called Peterberg. It's at about the 45.5 kilometer mark, is 350 meters long with 40 meters of elevation gain and averages 11.4%. Rouvy peaks this one at 17%. I've done this climb a few times on the old RGT platform, and man, it is just tough. It may be short, but once the gradients start going up, they continuously ramp up until the peak. Either you've saved enough energy to try and push this one, or you'll be stuck having to spin up it. It is short though, so if you're able, try to push up it for a good time. It's even worthwhile to not push too hard on the previous climb so that you have enough energy for this one, as it is the more prestigious of the climbs. Otherwise, it's really just an I hate my legs kind of climb. There's a short downhill following it in which I made 0 effort in an attempt to soothe my poor muscles. Now for this ride, you'll be needing both a very good warm-up and cool-down. The first hill with the max gradient is just before the 1 kilometer mark, and the ending is similar with Peterberg. This is somewhere in that 15 minutes plus region of warm-up and cool-down. Don't push too hard, but you'll definitely need to be warm and loose from the starting gates. And as always, I recommend pre-fueling your rides and including plenty of protein in that. It is especially important on these hilly rides, as you are frequently either pushing up an uphill or speeding down one. So there's not a lot of room to be shoving a bar in your mouth. If you can't pre-fuel, aim for about 15 to 20 grams of easily digested carbs while you're warming up. This should see you good until at least the first Rouvy segment. Aim for another 10 to 20 grams after the segment or around the halfway point. Now this is the type of route where having a lot of smaller, faster acting carbs can be a better choice. Your energy expenditure will be more punchy and the slower carb release can lag behind. I like things like gummies, mini chocolate bars, fruit puree, or a full sugar sports drink. These are always good things to have on hand anyway. And as this is a decent amount of elevation gain and distance, a post-ride protein would definitely be beneficial, as well as a magnesium supplement. Don't underestimate how hard hilly routes can be on your muscles. Now the view on this ride is a pretty mixed bag of stuff. There's a lot of smaller towns and villages interspersed with open countryside, single-car laneways, enclosed forest road areas, etc. The sky is a deep blue with massive fluffy clouds, and the mix of cobbles and tarmac add a really nice flair even if you don't actually get to ride it. I didn't make a hard push on this one and finished it in just under 2 hours. With needing a very good warm-up and cool-down, I would say to budget anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. You may even want to budget a bit of extra time in case the hills catch up with your legs along the way. It's definitely not a good choice for those with time restrictions. Overall, this is a tough route for the distance with a lot of good challenging hills. The mix of downhills and uphills can make for a very taxing ride, as your energy use is sporadic and concentrated. The elevation is spread pretty evenly throughout the ride though. This route isn't really a good choice for the newer rider, but if you can do a 600 meter elevation route, you'll probably be fine with this one as well. It can also be a good choice as a stepping stone to harder and more intense climbs like mountain passes. For this route, I would give a 4 out of 5. It's a good route, but there are a lot of cuts in the footage for things like traffic. It's mostly pretty seamless, but it does ruin the immersive feel a little bit. For the climbs, overall, a 3 out of 5. But individually, they're more like a 2 out of 5, with the first and last being a 4 out of 5. The short pinches are definitely the hardest part, and having them right at the end and start makes them extra difficult. The ones in the middle seem far less strenuous. For the view, 4 out of 5. I like the mix of city and country here. The cobbles are amazing and really add a lot to the overall feel of the ride. and overall, 4 out of 5. This is a great middle ground climbing route, not too much, not too little, and as it is heading into spring in the northern hemisphere as I record this, so it's a perfect time to try out some of the spring classics available on Rouvy. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, chipmunks. Please let me know what you think of the Hills of Flanders route when you complete it. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the ride, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, chipmunks, ride on.